America watched in disbelief as two titans of power collided, not on a battlefield, but on a digital war zone. On one side stood former President Donald J. Trump, the face of populist conservatism, armed with his Truth Social megaphone and a loyal base. On the other stood Elon Musk, the world's richest man, CEO of SpaceX, Tesla, and now head of the Department of Government Efficiency, armed with billions, satellites, and an uncanny ability to shake nations with a single tweet. What began as a disagreement over a tax bill erupted into one of the most chaotic, public, and personal political feuds modern America has ever seen. But behind the tweets, accusations, and headlines lies a deeper war, about power, loyalty, and the very soul of the Republican Party. It started as just another piece of legislation, one more sweeping, ambitious proposal from the Trump administration aimed at transforming the economic landscape. Officially titled the One Big Beautiful Bill, it was marketed as a comprehensive plan to stimulate the economy, modernize infrastructure, and bring tax relief to working Americans. Backed by a Republican majority in the House and a populist wave that had grown louder with each passing year, the bill promised a $3 trillion overhaul that included energy investments, rural broadband expansion, corporate tax cuts, and increased defense spending. Former President Donald J. Trump, who had returned to the political scene with renewed energy and a stronger-than-ever base, hailed the bill as the greatest investment in America since Eisenhower built the highways. In rallies across battleground states, Trump declared the bill a declaration of American strength, a plan to put money back in the pockets of real patriots, not bureaucrats and globalists. It sounded bold, patriotic, even revolutionary to some. But not to Elon Musk. Now serving as the head of the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, a rare bipartisan initiative aimed at auditing and reducing federal waste, Musk had a very different perspective. After months of internal reviews, budget streamlining, and AI-assisted spending analysis, Musk's team had saved over $175 billion in projected waste and redundancies. In his eyes, Trump's new bill not only ignored these gains but threatened to wipe them out in a single stroke. Musk didn't hold back. Within hours of the bill's public unveiling, he took to X, formerly Twitter, posting a detailed breakdown of the bill's cost projections, buried subsidies, and future debt obligations. His post read like a warning. This bill isn't beautiful. It's a $3 trillion time bomb. We saved billions by eliminating waste, and now it's being torched to fund political pet projects. America deserves innovation, not inflation. What followed was a storm of online debate, with policy wonks, economists, and political pundits all weighing in. But it wasn't just the content of Musk's critique that stirred the pot, it was the fact that he was challenging Trump, a man whose political machine had always steamrolled over internal dissent. Musk, one of the most recognizable figures in the world, wasn't just questioning the bill, he was questioning Trump's leadership, his math, and his loyalty to fiscal conservatism. Within Republican circles, panic began to spread. Musk had been seen as an asset to the GOP. Though not a career politician, his role at DOGE had earned him praise for doing more to cut government fat in 6 months than the last 3 administrations combined, as one senator put it. But now, he was standing squarely in the way of the administration's crown jewel bill. Behind closed doors, Republican lawmakers scrambled. Some urged Musk to clarify his remarks. Others pleaded with Trump to tweak parts of the bill to make room for DOGE's cost-saving measures. But neither man was interested in compromise. Trump responded in classic fashion, through Truth Social. In a fiery post, he dismissed Musk's criticism as the kind of noise you'd expect from a guy who sells electric cars to China while flying rockets to nowhere. He accused Musk of betraying the America First movement, and implied that DOGE had been infiltrated by bureaucratic elites who never respected the working man. The war of words quickly escalated. Musk fired back the same evening, retweeting an article detailing the bill's corporate subsidies and attaching a comment that read, "This is what draining the swamp looks like? Looks more like feeding it." It became clear to everyone watching, this wasn't just a policy disagreement. It was the opening salvo of a power struggle between two of the most influential men in the country, both claiming to represent the interests of everyday Americans. One was a populist political icon with unmatched name recognition. The other, a billionaire tech mogul with a global following and a growing taste for political disruption. As the bill moved through committee hearings, it became a lightning rod for division. Conservative think tanks that had previously supported Trump's economic agenda began to waver. Influential voices like the Heritage Foundation and Cato Institute issued measured warnings about the bill's long-term debt consequences. At the same time, moderate Democrats showed surprising interest in working with Musk's team on alternative efficiency reforms, further alienating Trump's inner circle. For the first time in a decade, the Republican Party was visibly fractured. The fault lines were no longer just ideological, they were generational, economic, and deeply personal. At the heart of it all was one simple question: who would define the future of conservative leadership, Donald Trump or Elon Musk? And for the millions of Americans watching, that question wasn't theoretical. It was about trust. About competence. About who they believed had the vision and discipline to lead the country through the chaos of the 21st century. The clash between Elon Musk and Donald Trump moved rapidly from a policy disagreement into a full-scale public war. What began as a dispute over fiscal policy soon turned into a battle of egos, influence, and raw political power. The American public didn't just witness a disagreement, they watched a full-blown rivalry unfold in real time, played out across platforms, press conferences, and viral media firestorms. The next escalation came, predictably, on social media. Trump doubled down, calling Elon Musk a chaotic opportunist who had never respected the values of real Americans. On Truth Social, he claimed Musk had lobbied for government subsidies, only to turn around and pretend to be a defender of free markets. He referenced Musk's past business ties to China and claimed that the Tesla CEO had taken more from the American taxpayer than any welfare queen in the country. The language was personal, inflammatory, and deliberately humiliating. Musk wasn't one to remain silent. On X, he responded with what many viewed as a declaration of political war. He posted a screenshot of a confidential email exchange from 6 months prior, an internal memo where his team had warned that unchecked government spending could destabilize key sectors of the economy. The memo had been addressed to White House advisors and copied to senior GOP officials, including Trump's chief of staff. Musk attached a simple caption. They knew. They ignored. And now they spin. That post went viral within minutes. The implications were clear. Musk was painting the Trump administration not just as wasteful, but as dishonest. The insinuation that warnings had been suppressed added a new layer of tension to the feud. Commentators began questioning whether the administration had deliberately sidelined DOGE to push through a bill that would benefit donors and loyalists. The narrative quickly shifted from economics to ethics. Journalists and political watchdogs began digging deeper into campaign contributions linked to companies that stood to gain from the new infrastructure projects. Connections emerged between Trump-aligned PACs and several defense contractors included in the bill's defense allocations. Suddenly, Musk's criticisms weren't just seen as disruptive, they were being reframed as whistleblowing. Trump's inner circle responded with urgency. They launched a media blitz, appearing on conservative networks to accuse Musk of grandstanding. Several high-profile allies labeled Musk a disloyal disruptor who had become intoxicated by his own celebrity. One senator even went so far as to suggest Musk was auditioning for kingmaker status rather than fulfilling his role as a civil servant. Then, Musk made his most explosive move yet. In a late-night thread, Musk made reference to Donald Trump's past associations with Jeffrey Epstein, something most political figures had steered clear of due to lack of confirmed legal connection. Without outright accusation, Musk posed a question. If we're serious about efficiency, shouldn't we start with the truth? Why were so many meetings left off official logs in 2010 to 2012? Though the post contained no direct evidence, it triggered an instant media frenzy. Hashtags trended. Old photos resurfaced. Political commentators debated the ethics and motives behind Musk's question. Some accused him of reckless insinuation. Others called it brave. Trump's legal team immediately issued a statement calling the claim false, defamatory, and dangerous. The former president threatened legal action, warning Musk to stay in his lane or face consequences. But the damage was already done. Musk had crossed an invisible line that few in Trump's orbit dared touch. In doing so, he showed he wasn't just willing to challenge Trump politically, he was willing to challenge him personally. The Republican Party, already strained, began to split more openly. A handful of high-profile conservatives, including some younger senators and tech-aligned representatives, began signaling sympathy for Musk's message. They didn't endorse his methods, but they shared his frustration with what they called legacy thinking in the party. These lawmakers argued that innovation, transparency, and reform were being drowned out by political theatrics and personal vendettas. Meanwhile, Musk's approval rating outside party lines began to climb. Independent voters viewed his confrontation with Trump as proof that he wasn't beholden to any political machine. Among younger voters, particularly those under 40, Musk's support skyrocketed. He was viewed not just as a billionaire, but as someone willing to take a risk and speak truth to power, even if that power wore a red tie and a MAGA hat. Trump's base, however, remained fiercely loyal. They flooded Musk's mentions with accusations of betrayal, questioning why someone who had once admired Trump's anti-establishment stance now seemed to be aligning himself with political elites and liberal media narratives. In their eyes, Musk had become just another billionaire trying to play politics, drunk on attention and disconnected from the real American experience. The political divide turned into a cultural one. Cable news anchors spent hours dissecting every tweet. Podcasts devoted full episodes to the implications of a Musk versus Trump showdown. Editorials began asking whether this feud marked the beginning of the end for traditional political alliances, and whether America was entering an era where celebrity entrepreneurs, not career politicians, would shape the nation's future. The fight had moved beyond Congress and past the internet. It was now a national identity crisis. The fallout from the Musk-Trump clash sent shockwaves through the Republican Party. What began as a disagreement over spending had metastasized into an ideological civil war. Conservatives who once stood shoulder to shoulder now found themselves on opposite sides of a growing chasm, one that could no longer be papered over with slogans or shared enemies. At the heart of this rupture was a question no one in GOP leadership wanted to confront out loud: had the party outgrown Donald Trump? And if so, was Elon Musk the man to lead it into the next era? Public polling began to reflect the split. Trump remained dominant among older, rural, and evangelical voters. His America First message, steeped in nostalgia, patriotism, and traditional power structures, still resonated deeply with millions. His base didn't just support him, they trusted him as a cultural symbol, a bulwark against the liberal elite and global institutions. But a new faction was rising within the right, tech-savvy, younger, and future-oriented. They admired Musk not only for his business achievements but for his blunt authenticity, data-driven critiques, and rejection of conventional political theater. This new faction wasn't interested in returning to the 1950s or restoring greatness through flags and rallies. They wanted structural reform, decentralized governance, digital freedom, AI-integrated solutions, and radical transparency. And they weren't content being a wing of a party that increasingly felt like a personality cult. The tension came to a head when a group of Republican lawmakers, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and centrist influencers launched a new political movement, the America Party. Though not immediately structured as an official third party, it was branded as an independent conservative realignment and pitched itself as post-partisan, future-forward, and American first in action, not just rhetoric. Musk didn't officially found it, but his fingerprints were all over its DNA. Its founding charter was heavily inspired by reports published by Doge. Its leadership included several of Musk's former SpaceX executives, tech founders, and 2 governors known for implementing aggressive efficiency reforms. Its digital infrastructure was run entirely on decentralized blockchain platforms, with a public ledger for campaign spending. Even the party's logo, a minimalist eagle circuit, was designed by Neuralink's creative team. Public reaction was immediate and polarized. Traditional conservatives saw it as betrayal. MAGA loyalists branded it a tech-backed Trojan horse designed to destroy the Republican establishment from within. Trump himself called it the worst idea since electric stoves, accusing its founders of being cowards who couldn't win a primary, so they're building their own clubhouse. But others welcomed it. Moderate voters who had grown weary of the political binary embraced the America Party as a much-needed third force. Disillusioned young conservatives flocked to its forums and live-stream town halls. Independents, long ignored by major parties, began seeing it as the only platform discussing the future with clarity instead of fear. In a matter of weeks, the America Party raised over $150 million in crowdfunding and private donations, largely from middle-class voters and small businesses. Its first major event, held virtually, attracted 12 million viewers, making it the most-watched political livestream in U.S. history. This wasn't just a blip. It was a tectonic shift. The Republican National Committee responded with emergency strategy meetings. Major donors began pulling back to reassess their investments. Think tanks aligned with the old guard issued white papers trying to discredit the America Party as a Silicon Valley experiment doomed to fail under real political pressure. But the harder they pushed, the more legitimacy the movement seemed to gain. For many Americans, this wasn't just about party lines, it was about reclaiming government from aging ideologues and performative outrage merchants. Musk's own role remained technically apolitical. He never declared a run for office. He continued to lead Doge, attend hearings, and publish fiscal transparency reports. But the lines were blurring fast. Every one of his posts was interpreted as a statement of policy. Every appearance became a coded endorsement or rejection. He had become, willingly or not, the spiritual leader of the political disruption movement. What made the situation more volatile was how international media began framing it. Foreign outlets described the America Party as the world's first post-industrial political faction. European political analysts called Musk's influence the prototype for corporate democratic hybrids. China, sensing internal U.S. instability, increased cyber campaigns aiming to amplify GOP infighting, hoping to weaken American global unity. But inside the U.S., the most serious consequence was fragmentation. By midsummer, state GOP chapters began seeing registration drops for the first time in over a decade. Conservative college groups rebranded themselves under the America Party banner. A dozen local and municipal candidates changed affiliations, citing a disconnect between their community's needs and national party narratives. Republican strategists panicked, not because Musk was a Democrat, but because he was something worse in their eyes, a Republican they could no longer control. By the end of the third quarter, it was clear that the 2026 midterms wouldn't just be a red versus blue fight. A third color was emerging on the political map, one not defined by nostalgia or identity politics, but by innovation, disruption, and a dangerous, electrifying new question. What if the future doesn't belong to politicians at all? As the America Party gained traction and political tides began to shift, the Republican establishment escalated its counteroffensive. What had started as a war of words was now a full-blown legal and political brawl, with subpoenas, investigations, and coordinated attacks flying from all directions. At the center stood two men, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, whose visions of America couldn't be more different, and whose power struggle had morphed into a high-stakes battle for the future of the country. The first major strike came from a congressional subcommittee loyal to Trump, which launched an official inquiry into the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, accusing it of misappropriating government funds, using private infrastructure for federal tasks, and manipulating economic data to discredit the president's economic record. A subpoena was issued for Musk's internal communications with DOGE staff, including emails, encrypted messages, and draft reports that had not been made public. Critics called the investigation politically motivated. Legal experts noted the timing, just weeks after Musk publicly criticized the administration's foreign spending policy and days before several key swing states were scheduled to host town halls organized by America Party candidates. Nonetheless, the subpoena was real, and so was the risk. If Musk failed to comply, he could face criminal contempt charges. If he did comply, the GOP hoped to uncover something damaging enough to shatter his credibility. Musk's legal team responded swiftly, calling the investigation a partisan fishing expedition. They filed an appeal, arguing the subpoena violated constitutional limits on executive retaliation against whistleblowers and that DOGE, by law, operated with partial independence from White House interference. The legal fight escalated quickly, and the battle lines hardened. While lawyers sparred in federal court, another bombshell dropped. A former senior analyst at DOGE, speaking anonymously through a major media outlet, revealed the existence of a confidential internal document referred to as the shadow file. This file, the analyst claimed, contained projections, intelligence assessments, and flagged irregularities that DOGE had uncovered in the federal budget over the past 18 months. According to the source, much of the data had been suppressed or deliberately excluded from public economic briefings. The most damning revelation was that DOGE analysts had identified more than $2.4 billion in ghost contracts, federal payments made to shell companies that showed no legitimate operational footprint. These contracts, the source claimed, were funneled through a network of subcontractors linked to political donors and super PACs. While the source never accused Trump directly, the implication was clear: the administration, or individuals close to it, may have been involved in the misuse of federal funds for political gain. Once again, the media erupted. The shadow file became the most searched term in the country within hours. Political commentators across the spectrum demanded transparency. Congressional leaders on both sides called for the document to be released in full. Some GOP officials broke ranks and joined the call, publicly stating that if corruption existed within the federal system, it needed to be exposed, regardless of political fallout. Trump, furious and cornered, took to Truth Social, calling the shadow file a fabricated smear cooked up by a wannabe dictator with a Wi-Fi signal. He accused Musk of using DOGE as a political weapon and vowed that, if we don't stop him now, we lose America to the machines. His base rallied, but outside his loyal circles, skepticism grew. Musk's team confirmed the file's existence but refused to release it immediately. Instead, they submitted it to the Federal Inspector General's office, along with a signed affidavit from multiple DOGE analysts who had worked on the data. Musk also authorized a redacted version to be submitted to a bipartisan Senate Oversight Committee, a move that further distanced him from accusations of political manipulation and painted him instead as a reformist navigating corruption with transparency. In a separate leak, it was revealed that the shadow file had also included early warning signs of foreign interference in U.S. infrastructure procurement. According to internal communications, at least 2 companies awarded defense-related construction contracts had ties to firms blacklisted by the European Union for espionage risks. These findings added a national security dimension to the already volatile situation and made any further attempts to discredit the file politically dangerous. Meanwhile, grassroots support for Musk's anti-corruption message soared. Small business leaders, teachers, military veterans, and even former bureaucrats began speaking out, calling for the dissolution of legacy political machines that had turned public service into a profit engine. The America Party's candidate polls surged in 3 battleground states. Trump's allies grew more desperate. Rumors swirled that members of his legal team were trying to block the release of surveillance logs related to a 2021 meeting between White House contractors and offshore investment brokers. Some believed the logs were referenced in the shadow file's appendix. If so, and if they were released, they could implicate several high-ranking officials, and possibly link back to Trump's private campaign infrastructure. The power struggle had transcended politics. It was now a test of institutional trust, technological transparency, and personal accountability. The country stood on edge. The courts were packed. The media was spinning. And beneath it all, the question echoed louder than ever. Would the truth prevail, or would America's future be buried beneath its past? As the dust settled from the chaos unleashed by the shadow file, America found itself standing at a political crossroads unlike anything in its modern history. The traditional guardrails of partisanship, legacy leadership, and institutional control had been bent, if not broken, by the public demand for transparency, efficiency, and accountability. In every major city and rural county, voters, donors, and community leaders were re-evaluating not only who should lead but how leadership itself should function. The court battles over the DOJ subpoena were ultimately settled in a landmark Supreme Court decision that reinforced the independence of federally chartered oversight bodies from direct political retaliation. In a 7-2 ruling, the court declared that whistleblower protections extended to executive agencies tasked with financial monitoring and that partisan subpoenas targeting watchdog offices would undermine democratic accountability. The ruling not only cleared Musk and DOJ of wrongdoing, it elevated their work to a new level of legitimacy. Simultaneously, the bipartisan Senate Oversight Committee released the full, unredacted shadow file. It documented a staggering array of inefficiencies, untraceable funds, and systemic failures across defense, education, infrastructure, and healthcare programs. While no single individual was directly indicted, the file triggered a cascade of audits and resignations across federal departments. For the first time in decades, accountability wasn't symbolic, it was operational. Donald Trump, still a major force in American politics, announced he would not seek re-election in 2028, framing the decision as a patriotic sacrifice and blaming deep state sabotage for obstructing his final agenda. His announcement drew massive media attention but little policy consequence. The political capital he once wielded with impunity had been absorbed by newer, nimbler power centers that operated outside the traditional partisan architecture. The party he once defined was now struggling to define itself without him. In the vacuum left behind, the America Party moved swiftly. Its decentralized leadership proposed a sweeping policy platform built around 4 core tenets: radical budget transparency, blockchain-secured voting, universal economic participation through AI-aided tax reform, and a hybrid public-private infrastructure initiative dubbed New Foundations. The platform was met with intense scrutiny but also unexpected bipartisan interest. Several centrist Democrats and moderate Republicans endorsed pieces of it, signaling a rare political alignment shaped not by ideology but by shared exhaustion with dysfunction. The 2026 midterm elections served as a referendum on this new reality. America Party candidates won 41 House seats and 6 Senate seats, not enough for a majority but sufficient to fracture the existing balance of power. These victories marked the largest third-party breakthrough since the 1850s. But more significantly, they proved that a data-driven, citizen-funded movement could challenge, and disrupt, the institutional monopoly of the two-party system. Musk never ran for office. He continued to lead DOJ while transitioning its governance model to a public oversight council made up of academics, former auditors, citizen jurists, and randomly selected taxpayers. His refusal to assume formal political power only increased his moral credibility. He was no longer viewed as a tech mogul meddling in politics. To millions, he had become a steward of institutional evolution. Culturally, America underwent a shift as well. Civic education saw a resurgence. High schools adopted open budget simulations to teach students how government finance works. A new wave of digital news platforms emerged that prioritized data integrity over opinion. For the first time in a generation, young Americans reported higher levels of optimism about their ability to impact national policy. The old cynicism that had defined political discourse was slowly being replaced with cautious, informed engagement. Globally, the ripple effects were undeniable. In Europe, youth-led movements began demanding similar fiscal transparency reforms. In Africa and Southeast Asia, governments looked to replicate aspects of the Doge model in partnership with blockchain developers. Even in authoritarian states, underground networks used Doge-style tools to monitor corruption and share reports anonymously. What began as a power struggle between two individuals had evolved into a global blueprint for governance innovation. Back in the United States, the greatest legacy of the Musk-Trump saga wasn't a policy or a party. It was the collapse of a myth, the idea that democracy was either left or right, elite or populist, red or blue. The American people had witnessed something different. They had seen the levers of power exposed. They had seen a billionaire dismantle bureaucracy not for profit, but for principle. And they had seen institutions that once seemed untouchable finally respond to the people they served. The reckoning didn't solve every problem. The divisions weren't healed overnight. But something had changed. A wall had cracked. A curtain had been pulled back. And in its place stood a citizenry more alert, more involved, and more unwilling than ever to let old systems govern without question. The fight between Elon Musk and Donald Trump had started as a personal feud. But it ended as something far larger, a national awakening to the fragile, powerful truth that democracy is not defined by who leads, it's defined by how the people choose to be led. In a world where power often silences truth, one battle pulled back the curtain, and reminded us that real change begins when everyday people start asking the right questions. Was it politics, or was it a revolution in disguise? One thing is clear, America will never be the same again. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. What would you choose, legacy or leadership? Let us know in the comments. And hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next story that challenges everything you thought you knew.